And thank you everyone for being here tonight, our panelists, and then everyone else on this call. I know it's not just the panelists. There are many folks here who are doing really incredible and powerful things to uplift and to build immigrant rights and workers' rights. So it's beautiful to see so many people here this evening. My name is Hallie Trauger. I use she, her pronouns. I'm a member of the Triad Workers Assembly in the Triad in Greensboro and surrounding areas, and also a member of the Southern Workers Assembly at Education Council. I'm also a volunteer with the Make and See Work initiative of Siembra, working on the Ice Watch training teams and Ice Watch hotline and dispatch, as well as some of the Fourth Amendment work that Mary will talk about today. I'm really excited for this event because, as we all know, workplace rights and immigrant rights and all of our rights to be free and to lead dignified and good lives are so deeply interconnected. And I'm really looking forward to exploring all of those connections with everyone here tonight. We have a very full agenda, so I'm keep my intro as short as possible, but want to give you a little bit of a roadmap of where we're going this evening. So we'll start out with an introduction from Leticia Zavala from El Futuro es Nuestro, talking about some of the conditions faced by immigrant workers today and the major fights ahead in 2026, followed by Dominic Harris from UE 150, sharing a perspective, a labor perspective on why attacks on immigrant workers impact all workers. So they'll each speak for about 10 minutes, and then we'll have 10 minutes combined for questions and comments about that part of the agenda. So we'll ask that you jot down and hold any thoughts, responses, questions, and comments until that point around 7:30, when we'll open it up for about 10 minutes of discussion. After that, we'll switch gears to more of a workshop and discussion format. So we'll hear from Mary about recruiting and organizing and creating Fourth Amendment workplaces that are ready to stand up to warrantless and unconstitutional entry by federal agents to protect workers and customers and communities alike. We'll have some time for questions and comments on that portion. And then a presentation by Katie about organizing workplace committees to build power, because we see that organizing defense and organizing in our workplaces are really closely connected. We'll close with some questions and comments there, and that will take us all the way through to 9 p.m. So really looking forward to it, and I'm going to pass it straight to Leticia so we can get into the main program without further ado. Thank you.
Thank you, Haley, and thanks everyone for being here. So I am Leticia. I'm one of the coordinators for It's Our Future, or El Futuro es Nuestro, which is a farm worker-led farm worker rights organization in North Carolina. Most of our members are H-2A workers, which are workers that come here under visa programs. They're temporary workers that come here anywhere from 2 months to 11 months out of the year to harvest fruits and vegetables. North Carolina receives approximately 20,000 H-2A workers. And it's the first state that started getting visa workers. We also see a lot of TN visa workers, which are professionals who come and work in the hog and poultry industry, and H-2B workers, which are workers that come here on visas as well to work in landscaping and seafood and hotels. So we organize workers to educate them on their rights, and then we help them address issues on the job. This year we won back over $100,000 in lost wages that workers had. Like, their employers didn't want to give them their last paycheck, or they didn't want to pay for their transportation that was owed, different things like that. Workers were able to file petitions directly with growers or complaints and get their money back. And I guess even though we work with a lot of our workers are here with visas, that doesn't mean that they haven't been attacked, right? the attack on immigrant workers is based on greed, and greed to get more out of workers to increase profits for corporations, right? Which means that at the same time that they're saying that there's all these illegals or undocumented workers that shouldn't be here, they're expanding the H-2A program. They're dismantling protections for workers, um, and they're gonna expand it into other industries, not just agriculture. October 1st, Trump signed an executive order and that lowered workers' wages by $5 in North Carolina. And starting October 1st, growers are now going to be able to deduct rent from workers. And if any of you know anything about housing for farm workers, it's disgusting. It's not places that are worth um, paying rent for. And so we've been consistently seeing um, the attacks, but at the same time, the eagerness to expand and bring in more workers from other countries under lower wages and less protections. Um, this year, with regards to just ICE and immigrants, 3 of our members were detained, then deported. 2 of our members self-deported, and we have a number of our members that are making plans to self-deport within the coming months. That is really, really hard. So we've been working internationally with organizations in Mexico, Guatemala, and Central America to make sure that those workers, when they arrive to their home countries, have services and have access to organizations that are going to support them over there. Um, we we are seeing a lot of increased intimidation from growers against workers, like threatening with ICE, threatening with police. We have an increased amount of police activity on farms. We were um, we were trespassed this year for the first time in many years by a sheriff in Rowan County because growers are using police to limit visitors on farms now. We have an increased sense of ownership, right? The growers are saying more, hey, I paid for you, you owe me, you do what I say. There's increased violations on wages and health and safety. And then we're also seeing a lot of harassment at the border by ICE. So a lot of our members, even though they have visas, again, upon their return to Mexico, they were being fingerprinted. They weren't sure whether they were being deported or there's something new gonna be on their record or what. So we're waiting to see what that means this year when they try to get their visa renewed. And then we saw a lot of increased filters for workers that have been coming for years and years are now being told that their visa is denied for no reason um, whatsoever. So it's been a really rough year. We believe it's gonna get worse, right? Growers are in a very, very tight squeeze. Tariffs are affecting them. Um, our rights and our protections are being affected, and the way we fight back because a lot of worker protection agencies are being dismantled, right, and are being taken over by anti-worker directors or secretaries. So we're still fighting back. We filed a lawsuit against the Trump administration for lowering the wages against H-2A workers, and we're um, pushing government agencies and government in our hometowns to take responsibility and to speak up with what is going on in the US. So we hope to keep fighting. We're on our feet. So yeah, that's it for our report. Thank you.
All right. Yeah. Thank you so much for that really troubling, all those really troubling updates, and then also that message of how and why we're fighting back. We're going to pass now to Dominic, who's going to talk about a labor perspective on the importance of solidarity and how we fight together to resist these and other attacks. So, Dominic, take it away.
Hey everybody, and happy New Year's. Um, yeah, just a little bit of my background. I'm a UE 150 treasurer, and I work here in the city of Charlotte, working water utilities. And just just to let you know, everything that's going on is real crazy, and it's especially crazy how we can't see a lot of the people that I work with can't see the connection to us that attack on the immigrant workers and immigrant communities have. Um, I say an attack on the immigrant workers lowers the standards for everybody. When any group can be paid less, denied rights, or threatened with deportation, bosses use that to push down wages and conditions across the board. Even myself or anybody else that works in the public sector can see this and how they'll use like contract work. So the contractors, they'll hire a group of immigrant workers for less to do more. And if the city, we have a fight with the city to increase our wages, if that is viewed as too high push up for our wages or for us to get more money, then they'll turn to the contractors and say, hey, we can get them to do the same work that we do for less. And that really handicaps our fights for more wages. So, in that aspect, we should do whatever we can to protect every community, not just our own, just because of the way that this practice can be exploited. Immigrant workers are also used as a wedge to divide the workforce. We've seen this in the past election, how Trump really honed in on that aspect, and past Republicans um, that ran for office, Republicans ran for office, they use that as a you're taking my job, they're taking our jobs, they're taking our jobs. Meanwhile, it's the corporations and the companies that are bringing them in and giving them these jobs in order to make that wedge more apparent. They use this to generate hate and fear and make us blame each other instead of looking at who we really should be blaming. And that's the boss, that's the corporations, that's these raggedy ass politicians that's been doing everything that they can to stay in power, and they just use this as another weapon in their arsenal to make sure that they get their positions of power. Fear, the fear of these attacks on immigrant workers also makes organizing harder because the raise, surveillance, and legal threats discourage collective action, weakening unions and protections for everyone, not just immigrants. We know this is true, especially because whenever we don't have a large groups or every group in this country, every group of workers in this country fighting for the right to organize, then you have unorganized workers that could be more easily exploited because the group doesn't have that protective strength of unity, so they can just pick us off one by one. And if they can exploit one group of workers that is unorganized, they'll use them as a wedge also to drive down the organizing of other groups. Exploitable labor strengthens corporate power as well. When employers can rely on workers who are easier to intimidate, they gain leverage against all workers in negotiations. Um, I think this was we saw this especially with I think Amazon, where they'll bring in like all type of workers and whatnot, and whenever they can like exploit or go after one group, I think it was especially, I heard one story about one factory where the bosses specifically pitted workers who were immigrants, saying that, hey, if you join this union, you'll be deported. And those workers voted down the union just so they can, maintain their way of life. And this caused the workers that were organizing to say, hey, that's real messed up. And um, really took the wind out the sail of some of the organizing that was happening in that specific Amazon workshop. Um, it's just a ragged ass tactic, and we know that they'll use any tactic they can to keep what strength they have and to keep growing. And we definitely need to have each other's back whenever it comes down to anybody being intimidated, especially the weaker communities that they can exploit due to these tactics that they have employed. Um, History shows repression spreads. Tactics tested on immigrant workers, blacklists informants, policing uh, are later used against citizen workers, unions, and activists. Uh, like I was saying, and I was giving this one very specific point, whenever they came up with the law that allowed them to carry out extrajudiciary kidnappings, to be able to take anybody off the street. And as the Supreme Court said, they can do it just based off the color of their skin. Just pull over anybody and take them wherever they want to, if they are a citizen but don't have the ID on them. Once they've used that tactic against one group, you can be damn sure that they're going to try to use it against another group. Um, it's just the fact that you can go and not have to put anybody through due process and just take them away from their family, friends without any other thing other than the way that they look, or just because you suspect them of being an immigrant. They can use this tactic to take me, anybody that they want to, off of the street and arrest them, put them in a facility, causing them to miss work, causing them to miss out bills being paid, just disrupting their whole lives. And it's these things happen because we allow them to happen. And if we don't stand up for each other whenever these things do happen, whenever they go about taking away someone's right to due process, anybody's right to due process, as given to us by the Constitution. It doesn't say just any citizen. It says anybody on American soil. These um, these rights are supposed to be undeniable. It's supposed to be given to anybody in the world, as we are supposed to see, like through the American lens. These rights that we come up with are rights that are supposed to be guaranteed to everybody, and we are just supposed to be doing them here as an example to show the world that this is how you treat people. And whenever we erode those rights and drag everybody down, and just use that to get people out of the country, they're using that as a test, because only thing they have to do is say you don't belong here to get you out of here. And then it's going to take you forever to get back to your country or get back to where you're supposed to be. Um, uh, 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 get back to where you're supposed to be, get back to your life, because they aren't allowing you to go through the proper court system to prove your innocence. It's just taking you, abducting you, kidnapping you, and really just destroying everything that you're trying to do just because they think or they want to. You know what I'm saying? These are just tactics that they use, again, just to keep power and gain their own power. Um, Immigrant workers are already part of the working class. They work in hospitals, university, construction, logistics, food services, public services. Attacks on them destabilize entire industries. We already have immigrants here. They're already working among us. Some of our parents were immigrants, and it's just part of our society and part of how America was built. If we don't protect the immigrant community, it's basically like we're destroying our country. Um, and again, I don't see any reason of why we do this other than it's just another tool for those in power to stay in power. Um, we have to remember that solitary wins material gain. Solidarity wins material gain. When workers stand together across immigration status, they win higher wages, safer conditions, and stronger contracts. Division guarantees losses. I want everybody to just let that soak in. Division will guarantee losses. We know this. I said so previously, but just to say it again, whenever they can divide us, they can destroy us. Whenever they can just split us up or draw these wedges between us, they can destroy us. They have leverage over us whenever they can get one group to look at another group of the same working class, and instead of looking at them, the ones that are really the oppressors, the ones that are really driving down our wages and making sure that we are weak. Whenever we stand together in solidarity, whenever we stand together, making sure that all of us have each other's backs, at least when it comes down to work, we can hate each other on other frames. You know, you can hate the way somebody dress, you can hate the way somebody talks, you know, the language they use. But so far as being able to provide and care for their families, being able to, you know, get the things that they deserve out of life, that's when we need to draw the line. You know, we can hate each other for these little itty bitty things, but if we're going to really work to have improved life, we need to know that we need to stand together in solidarity whenever it's time for us to go for higher wages, better working conditions, and safe conditions. Um, so we need to also understand the bosses don't care about borders, only profits. Immigration crackdowns don't stop exploitations. They just make it cheaper and more brutal. So as we've heard in the previous from the previous panelists, she said that Trump signed an executive order to decrease raises by $5. Now there's cheaper labor coming into the country, and they're going to use that cheaper labor to drive down all labor whenever they can. We have a saying in the Southern Workers Assembly that the South is a testing ground, and they use immigrant workers in that testing ground to further drive the divisions. You know, they use this because everybody know the Southern region of America. They'll move a company from the North or from the more unionized areas to test what they can do to workers down here. And immigrants are a big part of that equation. Um, Now, again, they don't care about the borders because they'll get workers over here when they want or need workers over here. And whenever they do, if they can get them for cheaper, they will. And you know, turning against each other is not how we are going to win. We only win with solidarity between each other. As the bosses don't care about any of that. Only thing they want is more money in their pocket, more money in their pocket, more profit for their investors, and to be able to keep us in our places. But we also need to understand that our place isn't where they want us. Our place is where we need to be. Our place is where we want to be. Defending immigrant workers is self-defense for the working class. Protecting the most targeted workers protects everyone's future. We have to remember that if we stand beside each other, if we protect each other, if we hold it down for one another, then everyone will rise up. And I believe that's all I have. Thank you for letting me speak in this session.
All right, thank you so much. Just want to echo that last point. Defending immigrant workers is defending the working class, and we can win when we stand up in solidarity. So we have some time for questions and comments and reactions. I see a lot of fantastic breach and applause reactions in the chat. So if you would like to ask a question of either Leticia or Dominic, or share your reactions or your thoughts about how we can stand in solidarity and fight fear and division. We have about 10 minutes for open discussion, and a lot of fantastic perspectives here. If you want to, yes, you can please raise your Zoom hand or put in the chat if you'd like to speak. That'll make it a little bit easier for me to facilitate. So I see Wa up first. Take it away.
Yeah. Thank you, Letitia and Dominic, for your report. I think it's good to, if nothing else, letting people know, they can take a lot of things away from us, but that should not change how hard we need to fight for what is rightfully ours. It's good working conditions, good living conditions. Something I was thinking about as you were saying, Dominic, about how they were taking more and more rights away from immigrants. That reminds me of how NC State is basically not very openly. I wouldn't know if my colleague didn't tell me, making housing having less and less housing units available for international students. Um, what do I call it? Yeah, this and I mean the website still says, "Oh, this building is for student, faculty, and staff," but it's like we know, like, yeah, you're actually not having that for international students anymore. So like, what's going on? Like, so even that is going on. So even that's happening. So I guess one question I have to ask is, how would you what's your advice for like maintaining the willingness to fight when all these things around you are like being taken away?
Maybe let's hear from a couple of questions and comments, and then I'll pass it back to the panelists to respond. So I see a hand from Mike Holmes.
Hey y'all. I have kind of a question more geared towards Leticia. And it's really just like, what are material ways that we can support your organization or highlight the struggle that you are dealing with? And just yeah, just like what are the material ways to support uh It's Our Future?
So maybe if you want to respond to that directly, and then also speak to that question of how do we keep up the fight, and then I'll pass to Dominic to speak to that question as well.
Hey, yes, thank you for that question. There's definitely a lot to do. We are having our assembly this year, in August, and so because farm workers rely on their grower for transportation, housing, immigration status, and work. We need volunteers or people like y'all to help us transport workers to meetings, trainings, and events. So you can sign up to be a volunteer. You can get on our listserv, and then we have our dates specifically for volunteers. They're usually Sundays, so we ask people to give up their Sunday, come pick up a worker, bring them to the meeting, hang out during the meeting, and then take them back home afterwards. We also have a health and safety packet that we give to workers every year. So we collect electrolytes in powder. So your organization, your church, your school can have a hydration packet drive and deliver them to us. Those deliveries will be on May Day. So you can come and hang out with us on our land and have food while you deliver your hydration packets. And of course, donations and speaking events to spread the word on our work is also good. And I will say just what keeps us going, I mean, the need. Farm workers have been exploited for centuries. You know, this is not the first that we see attacks on immigrants and farm workers. And the only way to move is to move forward. And I think that it's important to not give up. It's important to take into consideration movements that have been fighting for years and years and years and are still there. Yeah, so just let's be together. If you want to release, come on to the fields one day, hang out with us, and yeah, let's share stories and food together.
Thank you. It's beautiful. Dominic, do you want to also speak to the question of how do we keep up the fight?
And so keeping up the fight, especially when you're part of an organization that involves us staying connected and staying plugged in. I know organizations can be split up into many different tasks and many different things, including their own fights, which may be around the budget, which may be around, some special thing that the employer has done to a specific employee. I know we filed grievances. So you have different lanes and different organizations, but to be able to keep up this fight specifically, you have to stay plugged in with the organizations that are doing the groundwork to know what's going on. So it's important to have committees assigned to the tests. If it's not a committee, at least have one person or spokesperson that can be assigned to that specific group or those groups that are involved in certain fights that your organization has decided to take up. I know UE has done many resolutions in support of immigrant rights and immigrant workers' rights, and just having people read those resolutions and having at least one committed voice to bring back any discussions that those other groups have had pertaining around their fight will enable the group as a whole to be able to assist more educationally while still being able to conduct the work that we carry out on a daily basis.
Thank you so much. Would anyone else like to comment on that question or any other questions? We have about a few more minutes in this segment if there's other thoughts or questions. I taught on Zoom for a long time, so I'm master of wait time. But if there's no questions coming to mind, we do have several really informational segments going forward. So maybe we can go ahead and start the PowerPoint and pass it to Mary, who will be talking very concretely about some of the things that workers can advocate for in their workplaces and do in their workplaces to build strong defenses.
All right. Thanks. So I'm Mary Ross. I'm a volunteer. I actually retired. I'm a full-time volunteer rabble rouser now, and I'm quite active in Siembra, like Hallie, doing dispatch and verify and ICE watch and this Fourth Amendment work. And I will say I'm not a staff person with Siembra. Siembra's got a pretty large cadre of people who are volunteers like me who get out there and try to work across the state. And Siembra is a North Carolina based organization, but the organizations we're talking about, there'll be a couple websites here that are relevant for all of and I think we'll skip through these about Siembra and go right here. Yeah, good. And so Siembra has been involved, like Letitia said, in ICE Watch and also wage theft and several things, several programs like that. They really launched what's called the Fourth Amendment Workplace Program early this year, recognizing that they really need to pay attention to what was going on in the workplace. And there'll be more of this later. They were seeing that the focus on know your rights in your home, it was being more successful, and that the agencies that ICE and Border Patrol and others were not being as successful being able to get people to open their doors. So they really were focusing on the work side. So they've been running this for a while now. We in North Carolina have recruited a couple hundred, over 200 workplaces, and there's East Coast, there's the Triangle where I am, and all the way over into the western part of North Carolina. And there's a website we'll have here that includes resources for all. Yeah, so I'm telling you about workplaces in North Carolina, but it's not just North Carolina. What this is going to be, this training is and actually one of the things that is the points that are on this slide are going to be made again later about the Fourth Amendment requires, valid searches. I will say Fourth Amendment, not everybody actually, when I talk about Fourth Amendment, knows what that means. I think you guys all do. Fourth Amendment of the Constitution is about unreasonable searches and seizures, that those are not allowed, and that no warrants shall issue, and here's what they actually say, but upon probable cause supported by oath or affirmation, in particular describing the place to be searched and the persons and things to be seized. So what we're going to talk about here is go through training on how to do this, how this works in the workplace. A full Fourth Amendment workplace training would include role playing and really focusing on what to do in the specific workplace. It would usually be a workplace or maybe a group of food service or related workplaces. Um, so we're going to do a short version here that hits the highlights and of the basic concepts of Fourth Amendment workplaces. And I'll invite people to put in the chat, what kind of workplaces you have, because I think there's a whole diversity. I think that'd be kind of interesting to know. So if you wouldn't mind, I saw some, people were in, seems like office settings, um, just a university campus. So you can imagine that know your rights in your home is one thing because it's your home, you can lock your door. It's complicated in work sites because knowing your rights all depends on, what kind of the building, what kind of facilities you have. So we will encourage, and we were talking about this earlier, is to the extent possible, if you're in a workplace, is then follow up and get additional and work with your workplace to really think through, what would happen if ICE or Border Patrol came on site and what would we do? A quick thing, a note, I'm trying to make sure I touch everything. I'm not a lawyer. We're not lawyers in Siembra. And so we're not giving legal advice. We are conveying what we know. And but we can't be able to answer every single question. And I know you may be familiar with some of the immigration law firms, so it's really good to be uh, be aware of that. So moving forward, if we'll skip ahead to the next slide, this is just briefly touch on what we've been seeing. This is probably actually an old slide. I know in North Carolina we had Kings Mountain, uh, like 30 workers picked up. In Georgia there were hundreds of them. They've been. We had Border Patrol here in North Carolina in the middle of November, and I know here in Durham, a few people were arrested when they tried to leave a workplace. So it's been going on all over the place. And if we skip to the next one, I'm trying to be efficient and just hit on the key points. The real big point is here is what they will do and what they have been doing is unconstitutional searches. They will enter without a judicial warrant. They will push past people, push through locked doors, break windows. And so that's what people have seen. And, in public areas like dining rooms and kitchens, that's one thing we worry about, and we'll talk about that further. Tire shops, and like they were hanging out at Beauty World, all kinds of places. They can target specific people. Often what they'll do is try to sweep in anybody who looks like they, brown or somebody they want to target and try to catch whoever they think they can prove is not a citizen. And there's I-9 audits. They've been stepping up investigation of employees who don't have work permits. So if we move ahead, and here's the point is, there were much more going around apartment complexes and trailer parks before, and now they're really focusing on workplaces, which is why we're paying a lot of attention to them. And an important point is when they show up, and the important point of being trained and thinking about this in the workplace is it's just like, for me, it's like fire drills. What happens if they come thinking about it, practicing, knowing what to do, so that if ICE shows up on the door step or Border Patrol, in the drama of it all, you get some muscle memory of, okay, here's what we're gonna do, who's gonna do what. Yeah. And so without that preparation, they can easily walk past whoever's at the door and get people to answer questions, just without any kind of their own right. So let's go ahead. The next slide is a video of a barber shop where ICE agents tried to follow in, and one guy does follow in. some kind of inspectors. Sorry, go ahead.
I didn't authorize for you to be in here. I need for you to step out of my business. Excuse me, sir. I need for you guys to step out. Sir? Sir? I need for you to step out.
These guys are conducting an inspection. Huh?
Yeah, that's a different whole.
They could come in here. Wherever.
No, they're inspecting my licenses for the shop,
right.
And you are doing a different thing. It's totally different situation. So I need for you to step out.
All right. When they leave, I'll leave. Okay?
No, yes. I need for you to step out. I'm gonna send this to the news media because I'm not authorizing for you guys to come in here without my consent. I need for you to step out, sir.
Are the guys over here?
What you guys are doing is harassing.
Can you go and ask them?
No questions. I'm not gonna answer any questions, sir. I'm not gonna answer any questions, sir. I need for you to step out of my business. There's nothing going on in here. Everybody that is in here is legal to be in the United States. Excuse me, sir. You're the only one in here without my consent.
I'm just waiting for them to tell me it's clear, and I'll leave. That's it.
They're inspecting. They're inspecting something else.
They tell me it's clear.
They're inspecting something else compared to what you're in here for. I need for you to step out, sir. It's my business.
I'm working on that. Okay.
No, you're not with them.
They tell me they're clear. I'm clear.
They are TDLR, and you are ICE or whatever you are. Okay. I know you guys are trying to do your business and your work, but I mean it's not the same deal. Excuse me, sir. I need for you to step outside. I need for you to step outside, sir. Sir? Sir? Hello, agent. Can I see your information?
He said no. All right. Yeah, we're good.
Thank you, guys.
So the next slide asks, what rights did you see? What did you see? How did that? What did you see the barbershop manager doing there? What kind of rights was he seeking? And I see a question about public school buildings. That's a question. Public and private is one of the key questions we're going to get to. But how do you feel when you see this guy standing there? What kind of rights do you think he's defending? Anybody?
See Rachel's hand up.
Intimidation, yeah, no rights.
Yeah, I was just gonna say, I mean, he kept saying what he needed to say and how he needed to say it. The fact that we have to have all of our, like, my white privilege doesn't attest for everyone else's who are black and brown, and they have to keep their ID on them, and now even their passport. So, like, that in itself, he was defending at a calm level. Like, he didn't need to be at a calm level. Like, the fact that he could have, like, yelled and raised his voice like that, but that in itself, like, he should be angry, he should be upset, and he probably gonna be upset later. And the fact that on camera he's doing it on purpose so he keeps himself accountable, I feel like. So he was saying what he needed to say to keep his rights, like what he was taught or what he needed to be said, because he has the right to do what he does as his business.
Yeah, and protecting the people in his workplace by having that. So if you skip to the next slide should be right, the rights at work. So just briefly, so the Fourth Amendment is the right to, they're not allowed to do unconstitutional search or seizure of, but you can also have the right to remain silent, which is the First Amendment, and you don't have to accept a search. You don't have to respond to questions if they don't have a warrant. You have the right to request counsel, and importantly is you have the right to record. So you have a right to record anything. So you saw some of the folks behind him starting to video. And it's actually really a good idea to video anything that's going on. You have the right to inform everybody in the office. You have the right to yell out, ICE is here. You have the right to blow a whistle. There's a, in North Carolina, when they were here, all these volunteers were printing whistles on their 3D printers. So you have the right to let people know they're here, to record, and unless they have a judicial warrant, they don't have the right to go on your property, particularly private property. So moving ahead to the next slide, we'll move quickly. So what workplaces can do, and here are the sort of key questions that we talk about for all workplaces, is review private and public areas. So what is private and what is public? And make physical changes perhaps to your workspace. You can install locks, you can put up signs to indicate what's private and where you won't allow agents without a judicial warrant. We should develop a protocol that walks through who's doing what, who's doing what when they show up on the property, who's going to actually be the person to speak to the audience. So the protocol that we'll go through later is everybody should know who's supposed to do what. Yeah, I see. So the man's gas station was locked. I see comments here about what you can do. And if you move to the next slide, this is going to, I think, make sure I remember. Right. So a big question is public versus private areas. And somebody asked about school. And so in general, public area is where the general public can just walk in. And here it is, the private areas where you don't have access. And so thinking about that, somebody asked about a school, and I will ask you, can anybody just walk into a school? I know that if I tried to walk into school, I'd have to sign in, right? So you can think about the workplace and sort of if people are thinking about their own workplaces here, can people just walk in or is there some control? And in fact, the barbershop, you might think of a barbershop as a public place because people walk in, but they're customers who walk in. So you have the right to control. So it's something that you can think about with your manager, with the people in your office. It's right, the whistles around schools to keep people safe. And so you can think through that, but it depends on your workplace and thinking through, do we just let anybody walk in or do we set some parameters? And if it's a restaurant, do you have private areas that you can cordon off? Or I've heard of restaurants when they saw, agents in the parking lot just closing down, shutting the doors. So you can make this choice, and it's something to think about what to do and what you want to do in your office. Yeah. And I see somebody says schools, people are supposed to check in. Well, that's something you could think about. I know in Durham schools, the teachers unions are trying to think about how to work that. If you move to the next slide, this is the second slide. So you could think about if you want to put a sign, and there's signs available from the workplace protocol that we have, and I need to put a couple websites on here. You can download signs that say, any federal agent must have a judicial warrant to enter here. You could put signs that say private. You could think about where you want to, have doors. If you want to have a door just to add additional safety to mark off the private area. And this is something you've worked through in your workplace. And I know in North Carolina, Siembra volunteers can follow up and work with you if you wanted to work through what kind of protocol might make sense. Moving to the next one and watching my time. And let's skip over this one because this is a useful thing. It'd be in the workplace guide, but if something happens, what to do. And here's the general protocol that you have for a work site that you can really adapt, I think, to almost everything. And the first few things are that if federal agent or more federal agents appear, first of all, you can clearly tell them that they are forbidden from accessing private spaces without a judicial warrant. And I believe the next slide is about judicial and non-judicial warrants. So you can just say, like the barbershop, you do not have a permission to enter. We know and we've seen on videos and photos that ICE agents will break in, and they have. But you can state your rights, you can stand your ground, and often just doing that will chase them away. Just a side comment, I was in Charlotte for a little while the Border Patrol was there in the middle of November, and there was this great video that went all over the place of Border Patrol driving up to somebody's yard where two guys were putting Christmas lights on a tree. And the owner of the house came out, videoing right away, and said, her husband, Brandy, they're here. Just them being there, asking the Border Patrol agents what they're doing, they scampered back in their car and left. So standing your ground can actually make them leave. You can lock any doors, depending on your facility. If you've got extra, you can ask people to go lock other doors to the building. And setting the alert is really important. Let everybody know. You have the right to tell everybody, either intercom or set up if you got some sort of text messaging or blowing whistles. Let people know so that they can take their own precautions. And so that's right up front, thinking how that would work, depending on if you're in a school, how would that work, or if you're in a warehouse or a clinic. This is really useful to work through at the workplace. Filming is really important. I'm an old lady and I've had to train myself to, when I have seen agents, is to start videoing and get my iPhone out and start videoing right away, because it's just so valuable to have that documentation of whatever happens. And if there's multiple people filming, that's great. And then ask the agents, who are you? Show me your name. The guy on the barbershop somebody commented, was not masked. A lot of them are now wearing masks. And so ask them their name, look for ID, and then the judicial warrant, and we'll go to the judicial warrant next. Ask them for a judicial warrant, and I'll show you an example of those. The judicial warrant should be signed by a judge, and in fact, most of the time, we've found if ICE actually has a judicial warrant, they'll show it to you, and they may have other agents, but they mostly don't have one. And if they don't have a judicial warrant, they don't have right to enter your private property. And so you could ask them to show you the warrant. You can also ask them to wait while you consult with an attorney. If you've got attorneys who can look at the warrant, that can also help. And then if they show you an administrative warrant, and that's on the next page, which is signed by Homeland Security, you don't have to say anything. You don't have to respond to questions. Even if they have a judicial warrant, it's not here, for Mary Ross for a particular thing, that doesn't give them the right to say, well, I'm here, why don't the rest of you show me your IDs? They have a warrant for that person for that day, or maybe searching some property. So, and you don't have to show the agents around. You don't have to escort them anywhere. You don't have to help them, identify who's citizen or not. Just like the barbershop guy, you can just stand there and say over and over again. And it's important not to say unusual, like to keep adding more stuff. Just say, I don't want you here. You need to leave. And so if we move to the next one, and I think I'm right on time. This is the last slide that just shows the difference between a judicial and administrative warrant. And one of the obvious differences, a judicial warrant is signed by a judge, and it'll have, like this one has district court, it's going to have the name of a court at the top, and it'll have judicial looking document, and it'll be signed by a judge. The administrative warrant, it comes from Homeland Security, And it might be signed by an ICE agent or Border Patrol, somebody in Homeland Security. It doesn't, it's not at all the same, and should be pretty easy once you've seen this example, how to tell the difference. Uh, all right. And so that actually is my last slide. This transitions over. It's just hitting, I think it should be the last slide, the high points of look around your property. What can you call private? What would you, what can you do to protect people? Think about who's doing what. I was at a bar recently, and the person, at the door who's checking IDs and they had a role. They were all thinking through what their role would be. And the manager, what would I do and so this is all useful to do. And we've been trying to recruit workplaces, across North Carolina. I'm in North Carolina, to actually call themselves Fourth Amendment workplaces, to go through this process and think through it, just because we think it's really valuable. And I'll actually say my faith community that doesn't have staff particularly, we went through this process just to thinking about our own community and the people who rent our building. And so I'd encourage you to think through how to do this, and probably, organizing, what we're talking about with Fourth Amendment and what you're talking about with organizing are really on the same kind of path. So hopefully that was clear enough. It's sort of a half of a Fourth Amendment workplace, because then the next thing we would do would be, okay, let's talk about our workplace. Yeah. Are there any questions I can help with, or did you want to keep moving and do the next one?
No, so we've got some time for questions, and because you ran quickly, that I think it was very clear, but that left us some extra time. So if people have particular questions, I'm going to add a couple of things for those who are in North Carolina. If you're thinking, I really want to try to go through all of this and actually have a full training that's specific to my workplace and has the pieces that Mary referenced that help you plan and protocol plan in your particular context. I dropped the request form. When you open that form up, it has options for Fourth Amendment training and also for ICE Watch training, which is the whole other component that has come up in the chat a little bit about how do we respond as other folks in communities. So you can fill that out for either. If you are in somewhere other than North Carolina, if you go to defendandrecruit.org, you'll see a lot of resources that can help folks who are not in that area, who are in other places, to either connect to what's local for you or to plug in a different way. But yeah, we do have some time for questions, including some very specific follow-up questions. One question that I give these trainings to and I get asked all the time, so I want to go ahead and throw this out there up front. So the very most common question we get is, given that ICE ignores the law, so we hear over and over again, we say ICE, like all law enforcement, unfortunately can lie, right? We can't lie to them, but they can lie to us, and they use these deceptive tactics. They ignore the law. They may walk past our no entry without a warrant sign. Why do we even do this if they don't respect the Fourth Amendment? And I think Mary touched on a lot of this, but I just want to reiterate a couple points of it because it's often on people's minds. So the first, as she pointed out, as we saw in the barbershop video, when we state those limits and we share rights, actually that in many cases can prevent detentions. Just having bystanders there, sometimes they'll just leave. But also we don't prevent every detention, but one piece that's more effective than people appreciate is that those videos can provide relief on the back end. So you may have heard a lot about the brutality of operations in Chicago and the number of people detained. What got less press was that 600 of those people were released, were ordered released, and many of them have been released because there was video. So if agents are coming in and they walk right by your private property sign and detain someone, that's not the end of the story. You're there, you have the video, you have on camera, this is private property. This says private property, you're walking past this sign. that is going to be extremely helpful and can provide some relief. And then lastly, as Mary was saying, this is also an organizing opportunity, right? This is a chance where workers can come together and say to their boss, hey, we feel really strongly about defending ourselves and each other. And that's a collective action among workers in a workplace. And so even on the front end, that can be very helpful. And thank you, Ben, for sharing that. We'll also make these resources available if you haven't been following my rapid fire links in the chat. But yeah, I wanted to open it up if others have more concrete questions, including specific to your kind of workplace. You say Rob and then what?
Thanks, everyone. What about parking lots? We had an abduction in a parking lot of a free clinic just less than a mile away from our home a couple of weeks ago. Is it possible to designate parking lots as private areas, and how do you do that?
So I would say, so I'm not a lawyer, but I just mentioned that my faith organization went through this, and it includes a school on the property. And we decided the whole property was private because we wouldn't allow people to just come. The parking spaces are designated for that. So we put up signs, and it was our decision. I don't know, what ICE is going to storm through and do anything, but it's something you can decide for yourself, depending on whether, and you have to go through and you might ask lawyers to help. But can anybody just come in, or do you only have parking for the people who are using the facility? Does that make sense for you? And Hallie, others, I know Hua's been doing a lot of training too. I see you on the training groups.
Yeah.
You want to weigh
Yeah,
in?
I can add in pesto. Parking lots are tricky. So as
Yeah.
are things like the dining area of a restaurant. So areas that are like really open to the public. The campus of my public university, it is pretty hard to put up a perimeter and to try to say like you can't walk here without a warrant. That's why we tend to try to define inner spaces. So if it's a restaurant, you can put a sign up at the counter and then you can say you can't come behind the counter. You can have a space in the back that locks. You can, in certain circumstances, if it's a church, you can say you can't come on this property unless you're a member of our church or something. And it doesn't hurt to try, but you're going to have a stronger case if it's something that reasonably not any person off the street would be able to enter. So trying to sometimes it's helpful to try to make those distinctions and say we're not going to try to make literally everything be declared private so that we can have a very clear this area is, and we're going to have a plan for how we get people in. But really, should be just a commercial for sit down with the people in your site, get a training. You may be in a case like Mary mentioned where you can try to push that for the parking lot. I know there have been cases of like construction sites. We actually have like plastic versions of the private property no trespassing because certain outdoor but worker only workplaces, like a car wash in the private area of a car wash or construction area, you can do that. So that is that piece. And yeah, the other piece is you can consult a lawyer for the specifics of your workplace. Most of the information that's shared here, all of the information that's shared here comes from Siembra consulting closely with lawyers. So we are not lawyers, but that is where this comes from. Wow, what do you want to add?
Yeah. First of all, thanks for pointing out that like the situation where workers are on your side, but the managers may not be. It's not the end of the world. Get them to organize, inform union. They have to do that. Love it. But also, something I was thinking about is my union organizing staff told me at one point, I think a few weeks ago, about how like, and it stuck to me. He says that publicity is sometimes your best defense and offense. And that got me thinking about like Siembra in the context of like, yeah, with the parking lot. So I'm thinking out loud. With parking lot, I think like because it's open space and ICE agents tend to be disrespectful too, right? They don't give a shit about that. So this is gonna go through what they can go through. like physically. And so in these cases, I think this is where, so I don't know if other places do this, but like I think for our verifying thing, we have a thing where it's like if you can get 10 or more people to show up and crowd the area, that just like become a physical hindrance to like be that physical barrier basically to ICE almost. I don't know if this is true. I think like Siembra, one of Siembra staff mentioned that like like a lot of enforcement workplaces, the private area does not actually have a log. So a lot of the times that means it's up to the shopkeep or the employee at the time or the shift to like have to serve as that physical hindrance. Say, so you can't pass here. And I can imagine that could be very intimidating and scary. But like having to like look up and face off someone who's wearing like vests and maybe hopefully not weapons, but like so this is this is something that was expressed by an employee before to me, that a lot of times it is just him at that shift. So now how can he, so he's not even sure like if he himself can like handle this. So like what happens? I mean, he's the only one who's on shift. That's yeah.
Yeah. So I think that's where I think the documenting providing relief can be really important. So both when people are trained to in Fourth Amendment workplace defense and when we go out on ICE Watch, Siembra's protocol, and this is not every organization's protocol, but Siembra's protocol is we do not physically impede law enforcement. Doing that can incur legal liability. It's taking a personal risk, but more importantly, physically impeding law enforcement escalates the situation. And if you're a person engaging in defense who's not subject to ICE jurisdiction, the consequences of that are much less likely to fall onto you and more likely to fall onto the person who's the target of that operation. Most of the time, you may not know that person, you may not have their consent to escalate the situation in that way. So in general, especially if it's somebody who's alone, I've responded alone to ICE Watch, you'll be recording from a distance. And then hopefully practice and you have the presence of mind to verbally state you can't go past that point. It's a private area. But you are probably not physically interfering for your safety and for the safety of others in the operation. But you're knowing that getting that recording and like you were pointing out, wow, getting that publicity, right? Like that video of that agent clearly disobeying the constitutional rights of everyone involved, that's a very powerful video to have. And the outcome from having that and being able to bring that to court and bring that to the press and anywhere else it needs to go can offer more relief than potentially escalating the interaction. Mary, is there anything you want to add to that?
I was just thinking, I actually skipped over that. Siembra always goes through just a couple things that can put you in legal jeopardy. And one of them is physically impeding federal agents. The others are like providing false information. That doesn't help. And helping employees to flee the premises doesn't help. In fact, there's examples of employee or people getting arrested outside of a building because they tried to get away and they were in a public road then. But yeah, totally agree. I hear what you're saying, Why if people are nervous, and that's where it would be good to think about what opportunities you have, who could be called to be there.
Yeah.
But getting a whole bunch of people there to block the agent probably could make things worse.
I was thinking I was just like in one of the protocol training, I think they mentioned something about 10 plus people can get together and sing a song or something like that. So that was how I make sense of that. So
yeah.
And there's a question in the chat if you can elaborate a little bit on what it means to be physically impeding.
Oh, I mean, heck, it means throwing a sandwich. It means what they think it means. But I think Siembra has most recently been saying when we were out verifying to stay at least 5 feet away from them if you can. I mean, in the barbershop video, they were in closed space. But physically impeding is it. So I'm not a lawyer, but it's anything they interpret as getting in their way of them being able to do their job. I don't know, Hallie, would you agree? I mean,
To some extent, so we have certain constitutional rights we can defend.
right,
So law enforcement likes to say that recording is impeding, and that is not true, right? We have a
that's
constitutional
true.
right to record.
Yep.
So they can say, don't interfere with this operation. And you can say back to them on camera, I'm not interfering here, I'll take a step back. And if they say, take another step back, you can show your feet, take another step back. Um, Obviously, don't initiate physical contact with an agent. That's what I was getting at with escalating the situation. But in general, we do practice. If you do a full training or you come to ICE Watch verification training, we practice standing up to authority and to law enforcement because they want to take a very broad definition of impeding that includes just being there as a citizen, exercising your constitutional rights, and that you can do. It's really having your body position so that you are recording, but they are not going to be able to claim that you are blocking them or touching them or interfering with them. So we want to encourage respectful, firm, um, you know, documentation and exerting our rights. It's a really good question. Thank you.
Can I ask a clarifying question for that?
Mm-hmm.
So what about for like the private area if when they walk into a place? Because I think when we in one of the training we did a role play, it was like if they walk in, you can kind of like can you still come between them and the private area so you can come into the private area?
Yeah, so the question is really what do you do if they push the point? So you can meet them at the door and say, "Sir, this is a private area. You need a warrant to come in." If they say they're coming in anyway and start walking in, you're not going to, you know, physically stop them. So that's the line between you can exert your rights and not impede them. And it's hard. It's like I don't want to undersell that it's hard because they are not necessarily following they may not be following the rules and respecting rights. So you can initiate, right? You can lock the door. You can initiate a conversation where your body is between them and where they want to go. But if they push past you, you're not starting a scuffle. If that makes sense. And it's tough, right? This is why we want to practice and do role plays and think about what are the physical geographies of the places we encounter.
Yeah. And if you can lock the door, you know, that helps.
And I see we've got just a couple more minutes for questions. Court and ICE kidnapping people there. If you're in North Carolina, Siembra is running court watch at in Charlotte and in Durham to share information and inform people about their rights. In those cases, mostly it is making sure that family members have the hotline to get support after detention, unfortunately, because those are very targeted operations. But
they have had
yeah.
people. Yep.
Over Christmas, that was the main way that people were taken into detention in North Carolina. There weren't a lot of arrests out on the streets, and there was a lot of folks calling because they had been detained in court or in immigration appointments. And yes, I'm going to share, if you're in North Carolina, everyone should have the Siembra hotline. If you are not in North Carolina and you Google like immigration hotline, you can find the one for your state. But North Carolina folks, please do save this phone number. Oh, and if you are interested in not calling the hotline, but becoming a verifier, if you go again to defend and recruit.org/NC, you could get there.
And can I answer a specific question? Donna asks about Durham. We actually don't have ongoing, it's the USCIS because we found that the whole area around the building is private property. And so people were having to stand so far away from the building that it wasn't even worth it. You were going to have to try to like make cars stop coming off. So they are definitely doing it, the USCIS in Charlotte and the court in Charlotte. But Durham, what they were doing is at the USCIS building, which is in South Durham. It's just that we found we would be trespassing and it was decided not to, which is tough.
All right. So we'll keep an eye on some additional questions in the chat. To all of these hotline questions, I'm going to say it is great to know the hotline in your state, share it widely, make sure everyone has it in their phone, and then look if you're interested in plugging in on the IceWatch side. But I think we are right at the time to turn it to the complementary part of this around how do we organize in workplaces. So I'm going to turn it over to Katie to talk more about that.
Hello, hello. Thank you so much. So my name is Katie Stinnett. I'm a graduate student worker at North Carolina State University in Raleigh, North Carolina. I saw a few NC State people in the chat as well, so love to see us represented. So I've been organizing with the NCSU Grad Workers chapter of UE 150 for the last about year and a half now. And then I've also actually just very recently started working with the American Association for University Professors at NCSU as well. So kind of double fisting a little, so to speak. So like a couple other panelists here, I've been involved with Siembra, North Carolina with Ice Watch verification and patrolling, and more recently dispatch as well. I just learned that just really a few weeks ago, actually. And then also for IW, I've been doing that for the last almost a year now at this point. But I would say that I really became more directly involved in organizing for immigrant workers in my workplace last March, when the Trump administration began to like kind of just suddenly terminate SEVA statuses for it was like thousands of students. I don't remember the exact number, but it was thousands of students across the United States, including at NC State. Publicly, we had two students. That was what the university was saying. If you were to ask them, but internally, we know that it was actually at least 11. So it was quite a bit more. And the university put a tremendous effort into hiding that number. We really had a hard time trying to figure out a way to even just support the students. And so what that really told us was kind of two things. One is that the university is not going to help us keep our international colleagues safe. We really need to just organize. And the second is that we need to just organize and build power to protect our colleagues on our own and demand for better. And so I'm here. I was originally going to be here with Jody, who is with the Southern Workers Assembly. The Southern Workers Assembly is a network of local unions, organizers, and organizing committees that are committed to building rank and file democratic social movement unionism as a foundation for organizing, uniting, and transforming labor throughout the South. And then a lot of the information in this, including a few worksheets, are actually from the Labor Notes Secret to a Successful Organizer, which is something you can actually get from Labor Notes online. I want to say it's like $15 to get the whole thing, but a lot of these worksheets are available, I believe, on Labor Notes for free. So if you want those worksheets but don't want to buy the thing, those are actually available for free, which is great. Labor Notes also actually has a lot of really great this kind of training and like workshop opportunities. I went to one last spring or last winter and or last November, I believe, in Durham, and it was really great. It was really, really great opportunity to go. But yeah, so next slide, please. Awesome. So organizing your job site, the most important way for workers to make their job site safer for our colleagues is to just get organized ourselves. This is how we have power. This is really important. Because when you have an organized group that's working together, you can pressure your employer to take action. So an organized group can also communicate threats and other information to the job site and take direct actions. And this could be distributing food, taking up collections. This is something that we were trying to get set up on campus, or we were trying to help potentially workers that may need help with groceries. We talked about trying to do that on campus, carpooling, check-ins. We've also been trying to do like Know Your Rights campaigns as well. We started that last fall. And kind of at the early stages of it, we've been trying to do that as well. And we're overall just encouraging workers. I'm in North Carolina, but really like anyone in the South to form an immigrant solidarity committee in their union or job site. And that's actually a lot of what I've been doing really in the last 6 months. Next slide, please. Beautiful. So if you know a few coworkers that are interested, maybe you've had like conversations with your coworkers about just how like you're worried maybe about your international or immigrant colleagues. sometimes just having those conversations with people who are like-minded are a really great way to start developing a strategy. Like you're really just kind of sick of this shit and you just want to talk. But it's just, I don't know, it's a really nice way to start. You can create a chat on, any kind of secure application. Signal's my personal favorite. WhatsApp is also great, especially if you do want to involve your international colleagues, because a lot of times they do have WhatsApp. They'll use WhatsApp to talk to family members from their home countries. So WhatsApp is also good, and I believe it is encrypted. I don't know that the security is quite as good as Signal, but I do believe it is encrypted as well. But a good note is that you really do want to remember that anything that you type in that chat, it can potentially be like a record, and you do need to be careful of what you put in there. If there's something that really should not be said in writing, maybe your chat is trustworthy, but there's someone that snuck in that shouldn't. We saw this with Signal, right, where there was like some incriminating Signal chats that went out. Like even Signal is unsafe if someone is able to screenshot. So if you are in Signal, you do always want to be careful of what you're saying in there. But having these chats are a really great way to kind of start these conversations. And once you build a smaller, trusted, and committed group, you can begin broader organizing. Next slide. Cool. So organizing conversations, once you have your core, it's good to start talking to other workers about the struggle. You can spend more time listening than talking, and that really is like a good way to get a sense of like what other people's worries are. I think this is especially the case if you're trying to help your international colleagues, because you may not know, like I was born in the US, there's things that I just don't know, and there's no way that I can know until I actually have a conversation with the people that are most affected. So really just like listening and like hearing how people are struggling, hearing what people need really is the best way to actually, organize to get those needs met. Um, I really encourage you to find anyone who seems friendly to the group chat. Obviously you want to be careful if it's a kind of an introductory chat. Like I know what we've done in the past, we've kind of had like introductory chats and then maybe a more core chat. And sometimes that's a really great way to bring people in, where you have these group chats where you can plan meetings and send, flyers maybe for similar, meetings and stuff like that. Those are really great ways to kind of get people pulled in as well. And when you have those chats, it's good to ask, potential questions that like, you might want to organize towards. Like one of the slide in examples, how do you think that our employer could be protecting immigrant workers? I know one that's like come up quite a lot in like my community has been like, how can we as instructors help our students who may be vulnerable in some way? So like, those are the kind of places where you can start to ask those kind of questions. Next slide. See, so once you have your, oh yeah, once you have your core, I think that repeated is a little strange. Is that the same slide? Yeah, sorry, thank you. Thank you so much. So anyways, building your team. So there's different levels of like, I think involvement, and it's illustrated really nicely in this like bullseye image, which is from labor notes. So your core is going to be the group that's like the really committed group. It might be in your core chat, like the people you talk to regularly about organizing. And then kind of the next outward part is your activists. They'll help you organize once the campaign gets going, but may not be involved kind of in the initial outset. And then you've also got supporters, people who will show up. They'll show up and hold a sign for you when you're ready to pick it, or they might show up and hand out blue cards and stuff like that, but may not be involved in the actual organizing of that. And then kind of outside that, you get the people who are disengaged that you may still be able to pull in as supporters, and then activists in the core. And then you always do want to watch out for people that might be hostile. Like, hopefully there's not too many of them, but there are people, maybe in your workplace that are anti-union, and you do need to identify those individuals and maybe be careful about what you're saying around them. Or, if you're really feeling up to it, having conversations to kind of pull them, maybe in another direction, but always good to identify the people that are hostile. I think especially when it comes to trying to organize towards helping your international colleagues, because they could potentially be a danger to those colleagues. So it's always good to just kind of know who those hostile people are. It's also really great to like kind of identify natural leaders. So like as you pull people in and get to know them, who just like seems to always be stepping up. I know, like I always joke around that like when I started showing up to these meetings, I was just the idiot that always says yes to go to these meetings. But sometimes like that is the kind of person that does end up, being able to lead these groups is just the idiot that shows up and just gets involved and like learns more and more and like suddenly then they're starting to lead these groups as well. And so like who's showing up, who's doing stuff and who seems to like thank you, Sandy, that's very sweet. But who's showing up, who seems to be a good leader. Next slide. Another really, really important tool, I think especially if you're at a place like NC State or like any university where you have a really large, space to work with is mapping. So you can map, this can either be your building, this could be your campus, it could be part of your campus. Oh, you guys are so nice. This could be like part of your campus, but mapping is really important. This can include, maybe public spaces where people meet up, places where that bosses are likely to be, places where the bosses are likely not to be, where are the hangout spots kind of in the area. And sometimes you can often make a chart where you'll actually have contact info. If you do take that contact info, you do want to make sure you're not taking like university emails. If you're a university student, or work emails, you always do want them to be like kind of personal, non-work emails, especially if you are in the public sector. Then you can be subject to FOIA requests, and you really do need to be careful about that. But so I do highly encourage, if you're collecting contact information, to actively say, hey, can I get a personal email? And not like a work email or university email, kind of depending on what your workspace is. But getting their information, kind of what their job is, if there's like a lot of variety, maybe graduate student versus if you've got a lot of housekeepers in your building and you want to organize with them as well, how supportive they are, and then over here there's like this really nice way that you can kind of grade them if you want. But I think also like labeling is kind of a nice way to do it too, where you can just say, oh, watch out for this person. Like we've done this before with canvassing, where we'll have like kind of red, yellow, or green. Like that's another way you can kind of do it too. Like there's different ways you can conceptualize it, and it's up to you and your workspace how you want to do that. But the number system can be nice as well. But yes, absolutely agree with Layla. Next slide. All right. So if your employer is not easily convinced, universities, I feel like, are a good example of this. Admin do love their gaslighting. But when that happens, you do need to build a campaign to apply pressure. A really great example of this that's happened at NC State recently has actually been organizing around like building like toxic buildings. I know we saw Miss Sandy in there talking about PCBs in Poe Hall. There's been quite a bit of organizing on campus in the last few years that has worked towards closing Poe Hall and then addressing some of the other buildings on campus. And a lot of the changes that they made really in the last few years, especially, have been specifically because of organized pressure on campus. Through some like really amazing people on campus, including the grad union, played a really big role in actually getting another building, Dabney Hall, renovated, because that building is probably just as bad as Poe. But graduate student organizing was a really big part of that. And so when you work together and you apply pressure, the university or wherever you work will respond. Even if they say out loud that that's not why they're doing it, that is why they're responding. There are other potentially cases where your union leadership actually might not be supportive of standing with immigrant workers. When I was at Labor Notes last November, we had like a really long discussion about this. Where like, what happens if the leadership is like just not supportive? Like, what do we do? And in that case, you can actually build campaigns within your union as well. Maybe that's forming a committee to try to push leadership to be more supportive of your immigrant workers. Sometimes, union leadership may be supportive, but maybe not want to like kind of speak to it. And so sometimes even just like, forming a committee to say, hey, we want to like, say formally, like we want to help our immigrant colleagues and support them in any way we can. Like, you can build these committees kind of within your union as well. It's just a really great way to also organize. And then before you even do any of this stuff, it is really important to have a clear understanding of what you want, both from your union if you're organizing kind of within the union, or from your employer. And that can start with, your core group, kind of discussing how you want to proceed, and then like opening it up to maybe, the general membership, like what do you guys want to do? You can kind of crowdsource it. But having these like really important conversations before you build your campaign is also really, really important. Next slide. So this is a really great example, like a planning template that you can use. This is also from Labor Notes. I believe this is another one of the sheets that is free on their website if you want to use it. And so you can organize it, and change things kind of however you want, but you can start off with what's the issue, what do you want to fix? And then once you kind of have that issue, who are the targets? Who's the most power? For university, it might be admin. So who do you need, but who within admin? There's a lot of different administrators that do a lot of different things. Which particular administrator is going to be kind of your target? Which one, may be able to get you towards like your goal. If it's in a different workplace, yeah, like which is there a particular manager that like handles this certain thing, and like what can you do to pressure that manager? Which would bring you onto tactics. So like what kind of tactics do you want to use to actually pressure that particular manager? Do you want to kind of start small? Do you want to build up? Maybe make a list of different tactics that maybe kind of start relatively mild, and if they don't respond, then you start to like build to something more and more serious. But these conversations are really important to have. Like, you don't want to come in maybe too hot, or maybe you do. Like, it just kind of depends on the situation, right? And so they're important to like kind of write out and like plan ahead of time. Next slide. Here we go. So building a campaign. So you do want a campaign that escalates and builds power. There's a lot of different ways you can participate in like low-level actions. So you can do petitions, sticker campaigns, you can flyer. Tabling is one that we've talked about a lot in like my groups that I'm involved in. We've also talked about even just like kind of know your rights campaigns that I think are like kind of relatively I don't know about small, but like something you can do with like, what we did was we met with a paralegal within UE, and that was kind of enough to get us started on like these KYRs. They're still relatively like easy to do once we got started. And then as you build, you can start building towards like, hey, now we're doing these KYRs. Now we want to maybe pressure offices within our building to start putting up signage, maybe for 4AW is a really, good example, and kind of build your way up. And then as you build, you will also start pulling people in because they'll see you working and they'll want to get involved as well. So as you escalate and escalate, it can get to the point where you maybe need something like work stoppages. We've talked about, maybe the possibility as like people involved in education, withholding grades is something that I've seen discussed in university settings. But then there's always, strikes, picketing, and all that good stuff. And that's usually kind of, to my knowledge, like kind of the highest escalation is like, okay, time to strike. But you do want to build it up, but you don't want to start off with a strike, right? So like, how do you build that? And that is something that you guys can have like discussions with too, like in your committees and your organizing committees as you do that. And then hopefully, as you see in the picture, like as you get to that peak, you eventually get a resolution, and the bosses finally respond. Next slide. So I actually really love this image because like I hadn't really thought of it until I'd seen it, but like, we think of PPE with all these physical things like head protection, hearing protection. But 4AW is also like a protective measure, like, and that's something we've talked about, a little bit in like UE 150 as well, that like, how can we kind of build these protective layers to help people on our campus if something happens. Because as like we've seen that there actually have been injuries and deaths that have resulted from ICE raids. This is a safety issue. And so focusing on things like job site safety, and that could be something like having these like maybe we've had this conversation before about like clearly marking out, these particular areas. Like if we've talked about this, I think quite a bit in like 4AW as well, where like if like an ICE raid gets messy in your business, that could look really bad for your business, right? Like that could go viral and make the business look terrible. And so having these really explicit setups that you've maybe worked with the people in like your workplace can help me, that could be a good way to like get your workplace or like your bosses on board. Is like you don't want to get viral. Yeah, I'm kidding him this time. You don't want to go viral for like having an ICE raid in your building, but if you go viral for having an ICE raid stopped in your business, that actually might be really great business. You know what I mean? Like there's ways you can kind of even like angle it. I think with your workplace there too. But yeah, I just really think ultimately like having building like very clear protocols towards like 4AW in your workspace, it ultimately is a safety approach, and it's really important to have in our workspace. It doesn't help anybody to have like kind of an ambiguous protocol. It just doesn't. So next slide, please. I think we're getting close to the. Cool. So a really great way to kind of pull people in, especially if they're new to this kind of work, is kind of starting off with easy tasks. So maybe well, something that we've done is we've done like handing out blue cards or red cards, or stickers. I think flyering is another one that we have used to kind of like, get people. It's an easy thing to do to start. Actually how I started with a lot of the organizing I've done on campus was like, I think I had just like they needed the group, one of the groups I was in needed somebody to table, and I was just like, yeah, sure, I'll do it. But it was the kind of one of those ways that like it was easy. I just showed up, I sat at a table, I handed out flyers, and like I started to have conversations with people, and it ended up being like a really formative experience for me. So I do think a lot of these like kind of easy little like social tasks where like you can tell them or you can have all the information that they need on the flyer, so they don't need to like learn anything new. It's a really great way to pull people in. Petitions are another really great way to kind of start as an easy task. We did this at NC State where we had a petition that we actually, after we spent several months kind of organizing to get signatories for the petition, and then once we had enough signatures, we actually had a small group come meet together on campus, and then we actually like delivered the petition to the chancellor. And it was easy thing for people to just show up for. They don't have to come and bring anything. They just kind of showed up. But it ended up being fun too, which was kind of a great way to get people involved. There were actually, I think, 2 or 3 people that like when we did that petition delivery that joined us just specifically because they joined and heard about it and were like, oh, this is crazy. Like didn't even know this existed until they like joined in on this petition delivery. And so, yeah, they seem small, but they actually are really great ways to organize with others and pull people in, and even just get to know people. Like, they can be very social often, which are great for me. I love being social with people. So next slide. I think this might be. Oh, that's right. There's one more. So ultimately, unions really can be more than just like getting a contract. Obviously, that is really an important part of unions, but they can also be really useful communication networks and community defense organizations. A lot of the organizing that I've done on campus, even if it isn't directly related to or directly under the union, has all kind of started from the union for me. Like it has just been a really great resource for me on campus, just to kind of find ways to help, my fellow students on campus, that even if they, maybe it's like adjacent to the union, it usually like still just kind of ends up like starting in the union for a lot of us. And then I think this was mentioned towards the beginning, but undocumented workers still can join unions. There are a lot of people lying and saying that they can't, but the truth is that they can. Anyone can join a union. And then you can build specific campaigns that can be used to build unions as well. And then as soon as you have a group of workers building power and taking collective action, you have a union. I know that like sometimes depending on like which state, there are different difficulties. I know for North Carolina, we're right to work state. So a lot of the times people working in public sector, there are different difficulties, but they are still really helpful just for building these networks and building community defense. I really have seen a lot of that in particular for community defense as well. Next slide. That was it. Yeah. So yeah, thanks for listening to me. Yeah. Happy to take any questions.
All right, so thank you so much, Katie, for all that really concrete information, and especially for illustrating it with stories from your own organizing that I think really helped it come alive. Do folks have any questions or comments about the organizing portion, reflections from your own workplace, further ideas for solidarity? We have about 10 more minutes and an open floor.
Yeah.
What?
Actually, so early on, I don't know if anyone from IBW is still here. But if you are, I'm curious because I think IBEW most of the people there are contracted to do like sort of the construction or installation work. Is that right? Because I feel like I've always wondered like how it would work when you're in construction site. Like what sort of I guess what sort of safety can you implement against ice in these situations in these um, physical geography structure, if you will. That's only if you have, yeah, if you're an IPW. I was curious about that, if that's the kind of workplace you're at.
I see James said in the chat, yeah, I think to being an IBW, if anyone has specific construction experience and wants to speak to that. Otherwise, I can speak to what folks have seen from Fourth Amendment trainings, but
Oh, I'm in the IBW. Oh, can you hear me?
yeah.
Okay. Yeah, so I guess we're contractors, and so we move job sites a lot, but you can end up being on a job for a long time. And I guess it ends up mostly being, yeah, putting pressure on the contractor. Recently in Houston, there was a job that got raided by ICE, but luckily Harvey, which was the general contractor, actually didn't let them in the building. They ended up hanging around, and I think maybe got some people that tried to sneak out, but the general contractor didn't let them in. So it's kind of, I guess, harder for us because we can't put pressure on our employers, really. You have to put it on, I guess, the next higher level. That would be the GC. But that's what I've seen. But I haven't been on a job that's been rated.
I think that's a great example, though, because it speaks to how in every case it's you getting together with your work coworkers, figuring out where do we need to have the leverage and doing that, right? It's not one formula, but it's whoever's the decision maker, whoever's going to be able to help you set up that perimeter and create safety. I see a hand from Milo.
Hi, yeah. I just want to say thank you to Katie so much for speaking. I organized with Katie. And I wanted to just reiterate something that they had said, that these low effort actions like stickering, flyering, tabling are extremely, extremely effective and something that like I don't think gets enough attention. I know that like when you're somebody who's coming into organizing for the first time, whether it's unionizing or organizing something else, like it can be really, really like stressful. What do I do? Especially if like systems are already like really put in place, but also if like there's not a lot of organizing that has been done already, like you're trying to start something new, but these like low effort things don't necessarily mean that they're low impact. And also, to reiterate something else as well, is that these things are also like, can also help with community building, which is an incredibly important part of organizing, and I'm sure also a part of unionizing as well, is that not every single person is your friend or your best friend, but like having like connections with the people that you're organizing with is a way of keeping yourself strong and keeping others strong. I know that another speaker had mentioned that like when people are left unorganized, that like leaves them vulnerable to exploitation by like either the government or from employers, corporations, and it's extremely true. And when you have organized, but also when you're in community with one another, that helps to strengthen you. Like even if it feels like like it's kind of dumb to like to say, but like having just open conversation with people outside of all of the specific like serious stuff is also really good. It's a good way of like keeping like these bonds with people, and also helps with keeping people accountable and keeping people on the same page. And of course you don't like every single person that you work with, or every single person that you go to school with, but like building community alongside organizing is so, so, so helpful. And through all of the things that Katie just mentioned, like I think it just makes it even better. Um, and helps organizing so much. And it's something that I just want to reiterate. And especially if you're getting into organizing for the first time, like these like community events, like just are so good and so important and very low stress, but still can like do a lot of like work.
Thank you so much for uplifting that. And I think we're really approaching time, and that's a beautiful note to end on because that aspect of community building is so important. And as I think has been a theme through all of this evening, all of this is about organizing, all of this is about solidarity, and that is something we do in community. When we do Ice Watch, which is very concrete defense work, we'd say that that's an organizing intervention because it's about trying to create the sense of safety that people need to be able to organize for change. And a lot of those tactics that Katie went into in detail, that can help us organize and act collectively and create change, can help us create change in our working conditions, but also in our communities and more broadly in our states. And so I hope that folks have found this helpful to be an opportunity to think about how we can act together in solidarity and defend our rights and our neighbors' rights and our communities' rights and our loved ones' rights and fight together for a better world for all workers. We're going to close it officially here. I do want to say this has been recorded for all the folks who haven't been able to join tonight so that they can benefit from all of the really powerful perspectives. If you have a question or a desire to connect that you want to ask, but outside of the recording, we'll stop the recording shortly. And then if you want to stick around to be able to ask more privately, we do want to make sure that everyone who's excited to connect about next steps has the opportunity to do so. But thank you all so much. Thank you to those who presented and those who shared perspectives and everyone who's here listening and learning and engaging in your workplaces and communities.